Hey, hi, this is Ram. I'm the founder and CEO of Vayana Network.
एक मिनट रुक जाओ, रेडी होने दो। चलो ये कर लेते हैं। दिस कुड बी अ ग्रेट इंट्रो।
There is no denying the value of credit or lending. While in a developed country like the US, the value of credit is 200% of the GDP, in India, this number is just around 50% of the GDP. This is proof of the massive opportunity in lending in India. And while many founders are fighting for a share of the lending pie, very few would understand the levers behind running a successful lending business like our guest does. Ramaswamy Iyer, or Ram, is the founder of Vayana Network, which is in the business of supply chain financing, which means lending to businesses either selling or buying from other businesses. Ram is a serial entrepreneur whose first fintech venture was eventually acquired by a global company. He started Vayana Network with the maturity and wisdom of 2 decades of entrepreneurship behind him, and this is evident with the very first principles approach that they have taken towards building a large lending business in the space of supply chain financing. Listen on to this masterclass full of invaluable insights on starting up, lending at scale, and staying hungry.
So I was not interested in any of the standard stuff of an MBA school because, I still had this guilt conscience of having left my engineering. So almost everything I did was in the engineering field. So I was probably the only guy in summer. I didn't go to any of these FMCGs or banks or anything else. I went to a manufacturing plant off the coast of Bombay on the shop floor. So, I was quite intent then. So it kind of kept me, I think, little different from everybody else in the sense of where we were heading towards to. But, when I did my placement, and I think that was the other interesting thing that happened, right? So I was actually trying to get a job in Godrej and Boyce because they were engineering. And, I said, fine, let me get there. And there was this consulting firm that guy came in with wearing shorts, Bermuda shorts, and everybody else was in a suit, tie, and all that. And this guy came in Bermuda shorts. I hated the idea of suit and tie. So when I went to meet him, he was like, awesome. And he said, then while talking, he asked me what my rank was. I said, somewhere in the suburbs, and he said, I mean, couldn't you have done worse? And I said, oh, this is finally a guy after my own liking. And I decided to join that firm on a whim and a fancy. I'd never heard of this firm. It was a consulting firm. In those days, nobody knew consulting firms. So, it used to be called Anderson Consulting. Now it's called Accenture and all that. But, that time it was unknown. And I called up my parents to say, look, I got this job in this consulting firm. They said, I mean, after 2 years, that's all you managed. You had a job in Tata Motors and now you have to go and join some, 12-man or 20-man company, unknown company. So, so that was my first idea of myself, that I was willing to kind of stray beyond, what everybody expected out of me. And then I spent 2.5 years in this consulting firm, learned a lot. I mean, again, very, very good years. But I also came into this. Oh, everything. On my third day, I was presenting to the board of a very large courier company in India, an international courier company in India. I was third year out of B school. And, the sheer effrontery of it, right? And the sheer, nonsense of this, and I was very pleased at that time. And later on, when I looked at it in life, I said, what gall I had here. I mean, to go down and tell people who had spent 20 years doing their stuff, what good things they could do better, whatever shit. So anyway, so I came there and I kind of, I did a project with in Kota, Rajasthan. So I actually was there before this whole Kota factory started. And, I actually worked in the company where I did consulting work in the company that actually spawned the Kota factory. And, and the first time I had an effigy burnt of myself and all that because I'd gone to actually figure out how many people could be thrown out of work. So, very interestingly, my boss and everybody else left me alone. So, so as a 24-year-old, I was in Kota, I in summer facing a bunch of, a crowd that really thought that they could have my head off. So, so yeah, it was famous. I mean, and it, and in the summer, I guess it doesn't take much to get people upset. So, sometimes I used to get previously, very nice butter paratas and all of that stuff. Moment they heard I'd come to look at how many people to give it, suddenly the breakfast would disappear. My car would break down, so that was fun actually. I mean, I enjoyed it. And then they sent me about 10 months to Stockholm. So, and that was, I think, probably the turning point of my life in sense of looking at it, because, I went at a time when it was winter. So it was about 23 hours of darkness, right? I mean, that's what, Scandinavia is. And it's very depressing. And I had nothing but work. And I would just sit down and think, this is what I'm going to be doing the rest of my life. I was really kind of pissed off. So a friend of mine put me in touch with a small software company that was I think just about kind of done an IPO, but very small. in Bangalore. And, it was a small little bungalow in Koramangala, I remember, or a small office. And I went and met these 6 founders who were kind of middle-aged guys. And I came from Accenture, right? So which meant I was just full of this arrogance. And this 6 very, very ordinary looking, middle class South Indian, people were sitting out there on the table and they're asking me questions and all that. And the senior most guy suddenly got someone came to the room and told him something, and he pulled me and dragged me with a lot of glee to some broom closet where there was a router with some flashing lights, and he said, we are the first guys to get a VSAT link up, and VSAT in those days, getting a link up, was great. So, I came out and I said, oh, this is fun, yaar. I mean, look at what these guys are really kind of getting excited by. And that was, by the way, Infosys. And then the gentleman who kind of was with glee pulled me up was Mr. Narayanamurthy. So I came out and I said, oh, this is cool. And then I met, Nandan was not there in that meeting. And then I met him later in Bombay. And then, he said, why don't you go to US and join Infosys there? And I said, no, I don't want to go to US and all, yaar. Mera Bharat Maan. And I said, fine. And I finally got my last project in Accenture was in Devas in Madhya Pradesh with Tata Exports. Yeah, awesome place. I mean, if you're into music, then Kumar Gandharv's, very famous. But anyway, and again, I spent 3 months there, and I was used to corporate culture. I saw corporate culture at its best, right? Everybody fighting with everybody and all that stuff. And so when I came out on, I remember still the date, February 14, 1994, Valentine's Day. I just quit. Nothing. No, I didn't have an offer. I didn't have anything. I didn't know what I was going to do. So our office was in Cuff Parade, and I walked down, I remember, to Fort, which is near VT station. And I just walked down that entire distance, must be about 4 or 5 kilometers, just thinking, just random thoughts. And then I called up an engineering friend of mine and said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm designing perfume bottles, because he was a product designer. And I said, why are we doing this? Why don't we do something? He said, okay, fine, I'm bored. Why don't you come home? So at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I reached home. I reached his place. In the bedroom, we sat and thought. And we said, let's make point of sales advertising material. Don't ask me why, but we just wanted to make point of sales advertising material. And, 2 people who had no clue of their industry, nothing, but we wanted to make point of sale. A third friend dropped by and gave us a name for the company. So between 4 to 7:30 in the evening, we were done with our initial idea. We were done with this. And none of us had a clue that we were actually starting something. We just thought that, we were on another thing. And it was called SNR, Simple and Real Solutions for the World, some nonsense. And then I told him, look, no problem. We can just go to all these wonderful companies I've consulted with. They all love me because, they've seen me present. I can walk into the chairman's office and we can get business. And that's when I realized within 2 months, that's all nonsense. Without the visiting card and without that premium brand, you count for nothing. So it was fun. And then... Yes, printed items. So printed items. So that trip I did from Cuff Parade to Fort, right? I passed a lot of those smuggled stores. So used to have all these fancy stores that still imported items, in Fort. And I was thinking about what kind of material they could use to market. So that's when I went and talked to this guy and said, why don't we make some very fancy pops, right? Things that come out and do stuff. And he was a product designer. So we said, okay, let's do something. So that's how the idea came about, very honestly. So anyway, so we went and then rented a laptop. And those days, the laptop used to cost a rent of 5,000 rupees a month. And this guy gave us a laptop. First 2 months, I had some savings. This guy had some savings. We could pay it off. Third month, we had no money. And he started calling us up. So that's the first time I got used to collection calls, right? And, the landline phone.
And these 2-3 months, you were just trying to get customers.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was going and talking to a bunch of people. Both of us were going and talking to a bunch of people. And my parents was trying to tell everybody in the family that he's on a sabbatical. He's, it's just 6 months, before he gets a new job, because they were kind of embarrassed, right? I mean, ladka gaya, aaya Ahmedabad, aur aaya hai, ghar pe aake baitha hai, bina kuch kaam karte hue. So, so I know all that happened in that time. So then anyway, this guy started, pestering us for returning the money or the laptop. So we then went, so this guy, my friend of mine, had done some work with aircraft maintenance in US. So we went, and those times the airlines had just come up, right? All these new airlines had come up, and there was this wonderful airlines called East West Airlines. And it was actually supposedly very dodgy airlines. We don't know, but, we went there, told this guy, look, I am from Ahmedabad. This guy is from, double postgraduate from US, blah, blah. And we are interested in predicting for you when your aircraft should be maintained. And he had 2 planes, right, at that time. And this guy said, fine, wonderful. Why don't you give me a proposal? So we went out and, typed out a proposal. You didn't have a computer and printer at that time. So he went and typed out a proposal, came back to him. And we had quoted him some 30,000 rupees, I remember. And he said, no, this won't do. And we said, oh shit, now we have to make it 15,000 rupees or something. And he said, no, it should be at least 60,000 rupees. So, that was the first time I realized that the software world is, enormous, yeah. So then both of us didn't know programming. They had no clue of what to do. So roped in another friend of mine who was then working in Citicorp. And that's how we started. We just in IIT Powai, we had a friend who had a room and we started coding there, stuff there. It didn't work. And after the advance, we couldn't deliver that software. That's a separate thing. And then I started walking down. So this friend of mine, we rented an office near Bombay Stock Exchange. And then I was walking down Ornament Circle, if you remember that, near the Asiatic Library and all that. And there was this bank that was there, which is quite well presented, called ABN AMRO. So I just went into the bank with nothing, just went very British Dutch style, And so I went into the bank and I said, general manager ko milna hai. So he said, okay, general manager wahan baitha. In those days, people could walk in. So I walked to that guy and said, look, we are all these IMA guys and, IIT Bombay guys, and we have started something together. Is there any project we can do? So he gave us a project. And this Citicorp friend of mine, when he looked at the project, said, this is the most happening thing right now in the industry called cash management, blah, blah, blah. Let's do this. So by then we were 4 of us as co-founders. Another friend of ours had just dropped in one day and said, I was going in a train. I heard you guys have started, so I want to join you guys. It's fine. This is how it was created.
Was he a techie or?
Yes, he was a techie. Among the 4 of us, I think he was the real techie, and also the sharpest. One guy was like me, a tambram, quite, chilled out in life. And my main friend was a Gujarati, so he actually knew Dhanda. So we decided, 4 of us, what do we do next? After having got this project, so we went to Marine Lines, those triangle pods you have. We sat there, and that was our first strategic meeting. And for some reason, I was very vociferous in saying that we won't get into body shopping. In those days, that was the big thing for all IT firms, right? You would send people out and do labor arbitrage and all that. And I said, no, this is not intellectual enough. We should do our own product. And it was a lot of debate, and we decided to do that. And that's how, my first company was born. Technically, 1995 is when we decided to do it. And actually 1994. And 1994, I also went and met the small bank that had just started called HDFC Bank. And I had the good fortune of meeting all of those guys who founded the bank right then.
Okay, Aditya Puri and all.
Yeah. So Mr. Puri just asked me one question. He said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to do this. He said, chiller dhande mein raho. So I said, chiller dhanda kya hota hai? He said, transaction business. He said, jo roz chahiye usme raho, you will get sorted out. So 27 years down the line, I'm still in the chiller business. That's one advice I took on very, very honestly. And I said, I'll be in the chiller business. So that's how that whole journey started. And, we went in 99, and that time it was the peak of, what we are seeing now. A lot of people wanted to give you money. Actually got money from Warburg Pincus. It was awesome. And we went out and we said, we're going to spend a year there, and we had no clue what we were doing.
Your business was like a cash management software for banks.
Correct. It was cash management software for banks, and we had all the banks, a lot of banks in the world. And I went off to the US to set it up, to set up our US practice.
What does a cash management software do?
Basically, corporates like to kind of understand when their inflows of cash are coming in and when their outflows are, so that they can start managing their cash properly, right? Ultimately, that's all it runs on, right? All this profits of accounting treatment, dhande mein cash chahiye. So cash kabhi aata hai, kabhi jata hai. And because a typical large corporate has many subsidiaries across many parts of the world, you want to make sure the cash is at the right place, right? And earning the right amount of money. So you really are looking at how do you manage cash. And because even now, it's very difficult to move cash from one country to the other and all that. So you have to put in a lot of rules. It's actually quite a complex piece of operation. And we used to run the software for that for the banks. And a lot of the foreign banks actually became our customers.
So like the software would map out that redemptions of this much are due on this date. So by this date, we need this cash here to meet those redemptions. And this is the average daily cash which comes in, and like stuff like that.
It is, basically what they call treasury management, right? So you kind of figure out cash kabhi aa raha hai, kabhi ja raha hai. And in India, for example, you had this big problem of outstation checks in those times. Today, I don't think your generation will even remember it. And it was a big thing in float, right? People would give you a check today knowing that only in 5 days it will kind of come through. And you could discount the check right away. So, so we were in that business because you could get cash faster. So especially for an FMCG company like say Hindustan Lever, you would get checks from all your distributors, right? And you would want the money upfront. So, you would work with Citibank or Standard Chartered or one of these guys. So we worked with a lot of banks there.
So this was like a pure fintech business in a way. Then you had these bank partners who would do the check discounting, and you would acquire the FMCG customers.
We only supplied the tech. So good old model, right? License mein paisa, we used to get money and we used to run it for them. But, they used to no OPEX. So traditional product business, that's what we knew that time, and we sold it. And then 99 Warburg gave us money and we said, Labi, yaar, itna acha product banaya, let's go to US and sell it. So I went to the US. And of course, 2001 ke baad, dhamaka hua, whatever it is, and we discovered we had no money. What also strangely happened at that time is that we were shortlisted by all the large US banks as one of the best providers of the software. But then they were also worried that we didn't have a balance sheet, right? I mean, we were looking like any point we could kind of close down. So they picked up this guy who used to come second, a US Israeli company, and said, look, you have the money, he has the software. Don't get out of this room before you hammer out a deal. Right? So that's how this, so I sold my first company because of this. So in 2004, I sold it off. It took us 2 years to kind of hammer the deal out. And then I stayed on for 3 years.
With that Israeli company.
Yeah, it was awesome. I know a lot of people, when I did this deal, told me Israelis are tough to handle, right? And I think as Indians, they probably are the easiest community to relate to. There is this constant feeling of, being persecuted, being very aggressive and being very assertive, but still being very family oriented, right? I mean, so कितना भी झगड़ो रात शाम को तो ठीक हो जाता है सब. It is just a basic thing, and I loved it. I mean, I am really, whatever I learned a lot during those 3 years when I worked with them as an employee, and they really took good care of me. I mean, no doubts about it. But I learned how to actually acquire later on from them. The guy who acquired me, he said he had only one mantra. He said, "I want to make you successful. That's my job." And that struck me as one thought that, whenever I look at other entrepreneurs and look at them to join Vayana, I think that's the line I always remember. That's what my job is. So anyway, so 2004 to 2007, I stayed on.
Was it substantial exit that you got when the acquisition happened?
Decent. For us, it was a survival issue. I don't think it was a question of really selling for the largest or something. We had a great product, but we didn't have money. So, I had to kind of give it off.
When you joined that Israeli company, you were then doing sales for them?
No, so I was actually in strategy. So, they basically knew that at some point I would leave because, I struck them as someone who would not be patient. And at the same time, he wanted to keep me close to him. So I actually spent a lot of time in Israel and London and some time in US. And he said, just guide me on what we should do. So, as I kind of did 3 years of, work with the board. It was a publicly listed company. So I got a lot of chance to see how publicly listed companies work and all that. The team was great. So I did that and I enjoyed it. And, I got a lot of time to go to Tel Aviv and, Israel, and it's a beautiful country. I would advise everybody to go there. But anyway, so I did all that. And then, so there was this one business that we had started back in 2002 called supply chain finance. And essentially what we said is that, obviously, when you buy and sell, all these companies, they need money upfront, right? If they sell, they want money upfront. If they want to buy, they want to give it late. And because it's all part of cash management, you need to give credit to kind of get the money in and out. So they trade credit card we used to supply software. It was an extension of our cash management piece. We used to sell to banks. And I loved the idea. It came from a friend of mine who had come from ABN AMRO, and he made it. And, I was delighted with that idea. I thought this is the biggest thing that should take off. So in 2006-07, I went to all the banks where we had installed it, and we had quite a good installation set. And I found out that everybody had paid us a lot of money, but no transactions were flowing through it. Okay. And that's really where, because it was, chiller dhanda, right? So, so it's a Hindustan Liver supplying, invoicing, let's say 1 lakh rupees to its dealer. How do you give credit for 1 lakh rupees? Yeah. And that was only for 10 days, 15 days, 20 days, right? So if you are a bank or something, you would like to give big credit loans for long periods of time. Chota bite-size sachet credit, so nobody actually was interested in it. So they would do a few transactions just to keep their customers happy, but really not get into it. So I said, look, this is interesting. Why don't I look at this as a service business where I will actually make these transactions happen? So one of the things that I was looking at that time was a card business, the MasterCard Visa business. And I said, as a strategy for this company, for the Israeli company, and I said, why don't I make supply chain finance like cards? Standardize it, make it, because in card ko wahi hai na, productize it, right? Card mein 4-inch plastic एक POS machine है, कहीं पे भी दुनिया में जाओ एक ही था वो. right? So the mechanism was standardized. I said, if you can make it as simple as this, then it won't matter whether they take the money for 7 days or 15 days or 30 days. Everything can be digitized. So that was the idea. I walked out in 2007. I actually wanted to do with this Israeli company, but they couldn't kind of do a structure for me. So I was very clear I had to run it. So then I came out again. 2007, I just left. I came out back to Bombay. And then I started talking to a few friends and I started pitching this idea. And one of my friends who was part of the founding management team of HDFC Bank. So he was interested with that idea and he started talking to me and he said, why don't we do this together? So in 2009, we put it together with another couple of colleagues joining us, one from US and one from London. And we put this together and I called it Vayana because in Sanskrit, the Vayan word stands for weaving. So I said, this is a network, right? We will weave together the Hindustan Levers, their stockists, their distributors. Those distributors also buy from PNG. So ये सब पूरा एक telecom network वैसा बना देंगे, सबको पैसा देंगे, and we will ride our way to glory. That was the idea.
If you like to hear stories of founders, then we have tons of great stories from entrepreneurs who have built billion-dollar businesses. Just search for the Founder Thesis podcast on any audio streaming app like Spotify, Gaana, Apple Podcasts, and subscribe to the show.
Did you envision the debt on your books, or did you have was it an NBFC play that you will do the cash, like you will extend the money, or was it a alliance with banks and you will do the lead generation and onboarding?
So when I looked at the business, right, तो थोड़ा MBA training अभी भी बचा था, तो मैं जब धंधा देखा तो it is a huge business, right? I mean the opportunity is huge, and I said, look, if I become an NBFC, I would not be able to kind of cater to the entire business, right? I would cater to the fringes of it, and I saw this whole creation of the network far more valuable than being a book play. So that was really what I thought too, and said we will not be a bank or a NBFC in this business. We will allow everybody else to come in. But and I'll go back a little bit later on to why I structured it the way I structured it. But I would also talk about some of the mistakes we did, right? So 2009, here I am, having come out of an Israeli, US stint, made some money, feeling very top of the world, and then my partner, who was a successful banker, he feeling top of the world, and said, "Yaar, ye karna hai, to why should we start from scratch? Let's go and acquire a company." Right? So we said, 2009, let's go and acquire a company. So we went and acquired a company in Chennai.
How did you grow that Chennai company?
I did a lot of work on the product side. My co-founder, Keech, did a lot of work on the introducing them to banks and everything else. He knew all the bankers, right? So we kind of grew that pretty well. Of course, between 2012, when the crisis hit, right, the Middle East crisis, to 2012 to 2014, they went through their, brief trough. But otherwise, I think it was always a well-run company. In fact, its management team, when we took it over, continues to be there and doing very well. So I think I did a lot of work on product with them. I used to be, taken in as exhibit one whenever they went to a banker because, I was obviously the founder of Cash Tech, so people knew me. So I did all of that, and I would say I did a long, stint of doing nothing. But this Vayana thing was going on. We actually had 10, 12 people who were working on the Vayana idea. And then we were doing stuff together. We did a few transactions here and there, but we never got into it till 2017 when I finally took it out. And I said, "Oh, धंधा चलने दो. I'll be a shareholder. ये बनाते हैं." So 2017 is when Vayana Network got created. Also one of the interesting things was I knew this, a VC firm called IDG. Now it's called Chirate, and I knew TCM and Sudhir from 1998. So we, in between, we had talked about this idea. So when in 2017 I took it over, they agreed to fund it. So that's how I raised my Series A, I guess, for those guys. And that's really the journey of Vayana started really from 2017. So originally the name Vayana was started in 2009. That became a company called Clayfin, which is doing exceptionally well. And then 2017 is when I started Vayana Network. So it's a kind of complicated tale. And I think, a lot of lessons learned in that, but, don't take on something that you have no idea about. I mean, that's my simple thing that I have figured out. And especially don't assume that you know a culture.
I think part of the reason is also that unlike most first-time founders, you had money.
One of my constant things I have tell myself, and I actually have ensured I don't have too much money, and I'm not joking, I'm not making it, is that I think I lose my hunger. So I'm speaking for myself, right? So if I had a lot of money in my bank and I didn't have to worry about it, I think I would lose my excitement for life. So consciously, I've decided that I would cut down my lifestyle and also not have too much money, because I'm very terrified that I will lose my enthusiasm or interest. And you are very right. So so that 2007 to I think 2004 to 2009, when I had money, is when I realized I lost my mojo, right? And I really think that I should have, if I had just donated all my money off, or large portions of it off, I might have been better. But I did that after 2009. So by the time I started in 2017, I was back to where I started in 94. Depending on my wife. Then I depend on my parents, and then I depend on my wife. But we kind of got to a point where I think I need that usko angar bolo, book bolo, jo bhi bolo. You need that little sharp in the.
You need to have your back against the wall to.
You've got to then only you really are on the top of your game, right? If you can be, right, otherwise there's no point. So that's one big learning I took away from there. So I other than all that life experience, there's one more experience that I think really taught me well for life, and it's a very interesting experience. I never get tired of telling this. So back in 91, I went on to a safari trip in Kana in Madhya Pradesh, right, with a friend of mine, and we took a ST bus. No paisa nahi tha, so we took a ST bus to Nagpur to come back from Nagpur back to Bombay. And ST bus was being driven, and that time they used to have regular buses to Nagpur, if I remember right. And every 1 hour or something there used to be a bus, and we got one bus. And this guy was slow, man. He was driving so slow. I could see even bullock carts overtaking us. The moped सब हमारे आगे चल रहे थे यार. नहीं यार, बैठे पीछे बैठ के देख रहा था यार, कभी पहुंचने ही नहीं वाले हम लोग नागपुर तो. And then I saw buses that started after us also coming ahead of us. I said, this is enough, yaar. This is kya ho raha hai yahan pe? And then we reached Nagpur, and when I got out of the bus and I was kind of, relaxing a bit, the buses that went ahead of us came after us. And that puzzled the shit out of me. I said, maybe this guy's got caught in something. So I went to talk to our driver, old man, and I asked him, kya hua bhai sahab, aap to bahut piche the, aap आगे कैसे आ गए? तो बोलता है यार मैं मेरे लेन पे था, मेरे लेन पे चला रहा था, ये लोग बाकी लोग ये लेन से वो लेन जा रहे थे, मैं मेरे लेन पे चला रहा था, मेरा लेन सबसे अच्छा था, तो आ गया मैं. And that, I think a lot of people now talk about direction is more important than speed, right? And this guy articulated the perfect version for me, and I think that really set me, kind of on my path ever since. That it's very important to know the lane you're going in. Then the speed can kind of be slow, blah. You should just be careful with the lane you're taking in. So I think that plus this Anger thing, I think, struck me. I think those are two lessons that have remained with me.
Like, how do you practically implement hunger? Like, did you decide not to take salary, or?
So out of the 27 years I've been an entrepreneur, I've taken salary for 7.5 years. Okay. So, and a lot of times it's not because I didn't want to take a salary, but we didn't have money to take a salary. You paid out everybody and said, oh shit, abhi to paisa hi nahi hai, agle mahine ke liye thoda rakho hai, right? And so you kind of scrounged around. I think what also helped me is that, obviously great credit to my wife. We all came from similar lethos. So our lifestyle was also very, conservative. So it is not like we needed to do a lot of things, right? And kids and everybody, all of us were kind of in that value system. So I think that helped a lot. But frankly, what I've discovered is that if I spend more than 2 lakhs a month, then I consider it a red sign, red alert. तो मेरा 1.5 से 2 लाख के बीच में होना चाहिए महीने का खर्च. Then I know how to manage. उसके ऊपर बढ़ गया तो then all kinds of problems arise in life, right? So I think that look, I mean, everybody has their own mojo. I mean, it's not that you have to starve yourself or you have to kind of do that. But I just found this helpful because मुझे पैसा दे दो तो मैं सो जाऊंगा यार. मैं कुछ नहीं करूंगा. I know I'm inherently lazy, so I'll just not do it. So I think that was the third thing. So anyway, so I that's how I kind of started Vayana Network in Gusto.
So Vayana was like you solo founder, or
from a running perspective, I was the only founder. I am the only founder actually, and so that's really the journey that I came into Vayana Network with. Yeah.
What was your go-to market? Like, tell me about that. Actually, setting things up and getting the first few deals in.
So I think when I started back in 2009 looking at the market, and 2017 not much had changed. It was very interesting to me that most banks really look at supply chain finance or financing the supply chain, as you should rightly call it, a very low priority in their scheme of things, right? Because it was too much work for too little. So essentially, the only reason they did it is because their customers wanted it, and so they did it kind of almost apologetically. So it is very easy, and it still is actually quite easy to go and get business. It is not tough, because what really happens is that everybody is interested in the big guys in the business. So, they are interested in a Maruti, they are interested in an Hindustan Lever, they are interested in a Glaxo or whatever it is. Right?
Is your customer Maruti or the vendors of Maruti?
It could be, yeah. So very good point. So the guy who pays us is our customer. If you that is the definition, then it are the banks. So they are my customers because they are the ones who I connect the pipeline to and bring water down that pipeline, which is transactions, right? But so there are three-party system. एक तो what we call anchor. So that's your Maruti, Hindustan Lever, whatever it is, and then there are the counterparties, which could be suppliers or distributors. So we do both sides of the chain. So these are the smaller guys who are forced to either give credit to Hindustan Lever or they are forced to pay immediately when they buy something from Hindustan Lever because the bargaining power of levers or a Maruti or a Honda is very, very big. So they need cash, right? So basically, anchor बोलता है कि भैया ये मेरे दोस्त हैं, we have been working together, so you can extend money to them. And for a bank or for anybody else, levers or a Maruti say something, that's fine, right? So that's why the business kind of focused really on the well-known names, the big guys whose reputation was sterling and all that. And therefore, then they didn't care who these other guys were. Because Bhagwan ji hai upar, so everything will be okay, right? And so the banks only focused on that. And among even the business that they did, they only focused on the large guys because they were not interested in doing this 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 1 crore, 2 crore. तो हिंदुस्तान लेवर का सबसे लार्जेस्ट डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर होगा 40 करोड़ वाला तो उसको दे देते हैं, right? Not the smaller guys. So effectively, the big problem really in this industry was coverage. So if you were a Hindustan Lever with, let's say, 3,000 distributors and you would have 20 banks with you, they would all together cover 100 distributors, the top 100. Right? सबने 5 निकाल के सॉल्व कर दिया होगा, बाकी के 2,900 would not get covered. Correct? And that happened on the supply side as well. So people really focused on what was the immediate big guys that they could do, low-hanging fruit, whatever that they want to call it. So if you went to an Hindustan Lever CFO or a Maruti CFO, you would always find that a bulk of his business was not covered. So you could always offer that. So that was one thing that was there. So that is, I think, one coverage thing. Second thing to remember is that this is a short-term credit business, right? Because people don't want money for 1 year. They want money for 15 days, 20 days, 30 days, 45 days, which means that they have a decision point at least 6 to 12 times a year or more. So every time before they decide to get it financed, they can decide कि भैया finance करना है कि नहीं है. So it's the equivalent of a consumer saying मैं credit card से दूं कि debit card से दूं कि cash निकाल के दे दूं, correct? वो ऐसा नहीं है कि always credit card देगा, वो सोचेगा, correct? And similarly for a supplier or distributor of Maruti, they will say, "ये वाले I've got money enough in my bank, so why should I take a loan? I will not take a loan." So this really upsets the bankers because when they give credit, they want it to be stable and lying there, so that they can plot their interest income. ये 1 महीना लेता है, दूसरा महीना नहीं लेता है, तीसरा महीना कम लेता है, चौथा महीना ज्यादा लेता है, ये पूरा it doesn't fit into anybody's pattern.
Their cost of doing business is too high.
Too high, right? Because they don't know it will come again or not. So this entire what's called the utilization and coverage, which is the biggest problem even now in the industry. Right? That isn't skipped away. So when I looked at this business, this is what was told to me, right? I mean, if you can improve utilization and coverage, you have an ability to be service. But then when I went out, I realized two other big problems. I think one is that India में सब लोग बोलते हैं access to credit नहीं है, large SME credit gap and all. Actually, bunkum है. People have access to credit. Now, it may not be the credit you and I recognize. It may not be the credit that we are used to, like going to a bank. It may be credit that we are used to, like going to a bank, but maybe at rates that are unaffordable. But there is access to credit. The problem is you don't have access to affordable and convenient credit, right? 2% पे कोई ना कोई आपको पैसा देगा ही. If you went tomorrow as a consumer and said, I want a personal loan, 2-3% महीने का आपको कोई ना कोई तो देगा ही पैसा. It is not like you don't have access to credit. You may not be able to service it because you may not be able to pay off that kind of interest, right? So effectively, the point is that you need affordable. So India, the only problem you always need to solve 99% of the time is कितना देता है, right? Affordability, कितना टक्का है, right? You have to answer that question. Second is because this is short-term credit, regularly use कर रहे हो, it has to be done in a manner that that fellow doesn't think about it. Because so one of the interesting things I noticed in credit card world is that it is muscle memory, right? मैं जब कार्ड देता हूँ POS machine में, मेरा ध्यान तो उसके ऊपर नहीं रहता है, right? I'm still talking to my friends. I know what will come next. He's going to trust that machine in front of me. I have to put your 4 OTP number, and then वो एक पर्ची निकलेगा. खत्म. और पूछेगा मेरे को कॉपी चाहिए कि नहीं आपको. Correct? ये पूरा मेरा जहन में उतर गया है कि ये experience ऐसा है, तो I don't even pay attention to it. It's what I call muscle memory. I've done it so many times. I said that, look, how do I bring that into the B2B world? Now, B2B world is actually very complicated because one of the big problem is that everybody raises invoices the way they want to raise invoice. ऐसा कोई standard नहीं है. मैं भले ही मैं और आप टैली यूज कर रहा हूँ लेकिन अलग अलग इनवॉइस निकालते हैं, अलग अलग टेम्पलेट यूज करते हैं, तो ऐसा इनवॉइस तो स्टैंडर्ड नहीं है. दूसरा जो बायर है uska, way he accepts goods and decides that he will pay is all different by industry, different by company, different by process and everything else, right? So वो गेट से लेके अपना स्टोर तक लेके आके बार मैं अकाउंट्स को बोलना का पैसा दे रहा हूँ, दैट एंटायर वर्कफ्लो इज डिफरेंट फॉर एवरी कंपनी. So it's not an easy thing to standardize at all. And so we figured out, like, how do we kind of tackle this problem, right? If I want to make it muscle memory, I want to make it so predictable and so consistent, there should be no difference at all. The guy should raise an invoice and he should get money. If he gets an invoice, he should get paid. इसके बीच में कुछ नहीं होना चाहिए, right? And then we discovered that the only solution is to non-standardize, right? So we took a completely different thesis and said that उसको कहीं से भी invoice बनाने दो. As long as computer पे generate करता है, we will write the programs to parse it, right? So we figured out that most people who use a computer know only three things. They know how to email, they know how to print, and they know how to save a file. ये तीन चीज मेरे को सिखाना नहीं पड़ता. अगर कंप्यूटर है सामने तो ये तीन चीज आता है उसे. बाकी राइट, फोन रहेगा तो व्हाट्सएप आता है सब लोगों को. So if you really think about it, there are only few things that you can assume universally is true. We said our entire verbs we will use is only this. So invoice आया, save करो invoice अपने एक folder में. So you told me before this podcast that this thing is getting recorded on my machine, and internet goes away also, this podcast will remain. Think of the same thing. I create an invoice on my machine, I save it on my machine. I don't care about the internet is on or not. The invoice is there. Whenever internet is there, it will get uploaded. And then we wrote a bunch of very, very cool programs. We don't call it machine learning or anything. It's just very smart programs written by very good guys, which can parse the shit out of anything. Right? I mean, so it could parse out Word में भेजो, Excel में भेजो, PDF भेजो, Excel भेजो, जो भी भेजो आप, वो उसका जो निकालना है डेटा निकाल देगा. That document and the data we would send it to the buyer. Now at the buyer's end, we were saying, okay, how do I know when is he ready to pay? And then we realized every accounts department, कितना ही बड़ा हो छोटा हो कंपनी, accounts department को एक रिपोर्ट आता है कि ये सब इनवॉइस अभी पे करना है. उसके बाद से उसका मीटर चालू होता है, 30 दिन में देना है कि 40 दिन में देना है कि 60 दिन में देना है. तो हम बोले वो जो रिपोर्ट आ रहा है तुम वो भी सेव कर दो अपने फोल्डर में. Correct? So everyone focused on only the things that they were used to. I didn't have to go and teach them. They put the stuff they were used to. They didn't have to change anything for me. And the bank was only interested to know that there was an invoice and the invoice has been accepted by the buyer. And then if I have given credit, I will give credit, right? I'll credit the accounts. So that's all. That is all. There is a magic to this. The magic is to actually be invisible. The magic is not to have a Vayana in between. तो हमारे पास वेब नहीं है, वेबसाइट नहीं है, URL नहीं है कि आप बोलो इनवॉइस करने के बाद I have to go to a Vayana app, I have to go to a Vayana URL and make stuff. ये कुछ भी नहीं है. The whole idea was really focused around the fact that people should not think about you if you want them to use you. That was a simple philosophy we had.
How do you get the invoice without an upload on a website?
So I mean, if you like the same way you're going to get the Zencast podcast if I suddenly switch off my internet, yeah. जब इंटरनेट चालू होगा आपको मिलेगा ना, कोई फाइल आ जाएगा अपने पास. तो if you've used Dropbox, what's the beauty of Dropbox? Anybody who uses Dropbox will tell you that they keep on saving files to the Dropbox, and because they don't even think about which file to save or not to save, they just keep saving so that it is available on all their devices. Correct? It becomes a very muscle memory. Google Drive is not muscle memory. Google Drive में आपको जाना पड़ता है, ड्राइव में क्लिक करना पड़ता है, अपलोड फाइल और फोल्डर, बहुत कुछ सोचना पड़ता है आपको. सेम एक्शन है, but it's lot of work. We just said we will be Dropbox यार. तुम अपना एक वायना का फोल्डर बनता है, हम लोग जब ऑनबोर्ड करते हैं उसमें डालो, खत्म हो गया आपका मामला.
And you obviously install some software which does the same.
It's like a driver, right? I mean, that's it. Right? So it's invisible. It stays in the background. You don't, and we don't take any data of your machine. I wish I learned all those tricks, but we don't. We just take the files you intended to give us. So, but it's an opt-in. So that's the beauty of this, right? It is not a opt-out. So actually, when he decides to put an invoice in my folder, he's saying, I want to get financed. If he doesn't want the invoice to get financed, he will not put it in the folder. Simple.
If someone puts an invoice in that folder, does the money hit their bank like as soon as the process is done, or do they still further do some sort of opt-in?
Nothing. They put it in, and same day they get the money. Usually same day, sometimes 1 or 2 days later, depending on how the program is. But that's it. So the moment they put it in, and assuming internet is on, that file is taken away by us to our cloud software on Amazon. We will then parse it, convert it to data, send it to the buyer. And typically the way these programs are structured is that the buyer, because they're repeat orders, right, will signify his acceptance that he will pay, right? And then when he signifies his acceptance to pay, we will take that whole electronic data and give it to the bank, where we are connected into the lending system. So if limit is available, the money will get credited to the account. Simple. So it's exactly how credit cards work. Credit card, when you have a card, the merchant has a POS machine and there is an account of the merchant. somewhere पीछे से सीन से मास्टर कार्ड, वीजा, बैंक्स, इशुइंग बैंक, एक्वायरिंग बैंक कुछ तो करते हैं और वो मर्चेंट को T+2 पे पैसा आता है, right? That's all. That's exactly what's what happened.
Okay, so how does the limit get decided? Like you said, if the limit is available.
The limit is simple, yeah. So in supply chain finance, the key thing to understand is that you are never financing the borrower, you are financing the trade. ये थोड़ा profound statement है, ठीक है? अभी ताली वाली बजनी चाहिए, you know, when I say so. So this is like figuring out the strength of the marriage between the buyer and the seller, right? And saying that is this trade important enough for them that both will ensure that the money gets repaid. क्योंकि दोनों का दिल दुखेगा अगर ये क्रेडिट नहीं मिला तो, simple, right? So where does that happen? It happens when, first of all, you have had a supplier or distributor for a long period of time, right? You are used to them, they are used to you. तो एक 4-5 साल का शादीशुदा ये लोग हैं काफी दिनों से, तो they are used to each other. Second is that both depend on each other. एक को चाय बनाने आता है, एक को कॉफी बनाने आता है, दोनों को दोनों चाहिए, तो फिर they will stay together, right? I mean, simple. So I think that is the second thing. Third is that the brand should be something that is important, right? I should not be able to switch easily. कि आज मैंने हिंदुस्तान लिवर का कॉलगेट का टूथपेस्ट नहीं लिया तो मैं और कुछ ले सकता हूँ क्या? If you look at Colgate toothpaste, then there is a market for it irrelevant of whatever happens in the life, right? जो Colgate यूज कर रहे हैं बचपन से वही यूज करते रहते हैं. So that brand pull is very important thing. Lastly, मार्केट में ऑलरेडी क्रेडिट था. वयाना आने के पहले, बैंक आने के पहले, कोई भी आने के पहले से क्रेडिट चल रहा था धंधे में, right? And that credit, how is it worked? तो अगर ये चार चीज आप समझ गए, we call it the vibe model, vintage, interdependence, brand and pull and existing credit, तो आपको मालूम है कि ये शादी कितना पावरफुल है. शादी अच्छा है तो आप मियाँ या बीवी को पैसा देना उससे कुछ मतलब नहीं होता है. आप शादी अच्छा है करके आप दे रहे हैं पैसे, because you know both of them will work together to return. It's like, you know, financing a house. And if you finance a house to a couple who have been married for 5 years, people will tell you that the mortgage will always get repaid because they invest. Both of them invest their feelings into it, right? So the same thing is of financing a trade opposed to financing the borrower. Of course, you look at the borrower, but that's secondary to the trade. So the trick really is that once you understand the trade, then you can say that everybody who does the same type of trade can get financing. The trick in this is not to do one by one. So it is not like Akshay and Ram के बीच में जो धंधा चल रहा है हम finance कर रहे हैं. अक्षय तो बहुत लोगों के साथ धंधा करता है. मैंने राम के साथ धंधा समझ लिया तो मैं राम जैसा और कितने लोग अक्षय कर रहा है सोच के I will finance all of them. Because the trick also in this structure is to make sure that Akshay then looks at me as a one-stop guy to reach out to everybody in his network. Correct? So the whole idea is to scale it up like a network. Now the interesting thing is Ram है जो अक्षय से ही नहीं काम करता है, दूसरों से भी काम करता है. So Ram got introduced by Akshay, but now Ram, I have to figure out Ram किस किस के साथ धंधा कर रहा है. तो राम तो अच्छा है भैया, अक्षय के साथ अच्छा धंधा कर रहा है, तो अक्षय ऐसा और कितने लोगों से कर रहा है. So you know, you keep on building this up. That's why it's a network. You can't stop only at Akshay and Ram. You have to go Ram का, Arjun, whatever, you know, Karan, Arjun, जो भी है, सब पकड़ो आप. Because there is a pattern to this, right? If I am today a kirana dukan that is selling Hindustan Liver ka stuff, but I'm also buying from P&G, I'm buying from Nestle, I'm buying from ITC, and I'm buying from Balaji Wafers. ये जो भी मैं कर रहा हूँ, the trick is to really figure out is that if I am willing to do is financing of his Hindustan Liver, I'm willing to do his Balaji Wafer also. Correct? So but once you do that, that's when you can really build up this business. So that's how we have become the largest. You know, we do about 2,500 crores a month of financing by just doing this stuff day in day out. So मेरा सबसे बड़ा competitive mode क्या है मालूम है? It is not technology. No, it is not. All that is all okay. It is that I turn up every day in the same way and do the same shit every day. Consistency is the biggest thing that people forget in life, right? आप स्टारबक्स में जाते हो, रोज वही कॉफी पीते हो, वही निकाल के लेके जाते हो. आप ऐसा नहीं कि एक दिन केन्यन रोस्ट पीते हो और दूसरे दिन और कुछ रोस्ट पीते हो ना. And you are used to that entire thing that you will walk in, you will get the cup, you will walk out. People love consistency. And the trick, my competitive moat is that unlike all my startup brothers who every day wake up in the morning and think of something new, I am perfectly okay with thinking the same thing. तो मैंने बोरिंग को अपना कॉम्पिटिटिव मोड बना दिया है. तो इतना ही है बस, यू नो, और कुछ नहीं है. वही सड़क पे, वही गली पे हर दिन मैं खड़ा रहता हूँ. So I am part of the scenery now. So you can't take me out.
How do you do onboarding at scale? Like, because now, like this model which you explained to me, the four things that you look at, the vintage vibe, you said, sorry,
Yeah, vibe, correct.
vibe. So like that seems like a time-consuming thing, na, to figure that out. Like, how do you onboard at scale? Like,
Yeah. See, look, I mean, you take an industry, right? And when you map out an industry, let's say you take cement as an example. तो सीमेंट में कितने प्लेयर्स हैं? मैक्सिमम 5-6 बड़े प्लेयर हैं, उसके बाद बहुत सारे छोटे हैं, लेकिन बड़े 5-6 हैं. तो सीमेंट इंडस्ट्री का मॉडल रफली सेम है सब जगह, राइट? आई मीन इट इज नॉट लाइक समवन इज डूइंग टोटली डिफरेंट फ्रॉम देयर. So when you start mapping out that industry, you realize a pattern. कि ये इंडस्ट्री में आर डीलर्स कांस्टेंट, डू दे चर्न, एक दिन अल्ट्राटेक के पास जाता है, दूसरे दिन उलसिम के पास जाता है, और कुछ करता है क्या, एसीसी के पास जाता है क्या, व्हाट हैपेंस इन दैट इंडस्ट्री. सो व्हेन यू लुक एट दैट इंडस्ट्री, यू एक्चुअली गेट अ वेरी गुड आइडिया ऑफ हाउ दैट मॉडल वर्क्स. Then when you go and talk to one of the players and start, and that player says, look, I want my distributors to be financed, he actually gives you a lot of data, right? Because he needs you to make an a priori understanding of whether you can finance or not, right? So before I give a proposal, I need data. So when I look at that data, I'm able to churn it through and figure out exactly industry में क्या model है, right? ये लोग रहते हैं, कितने रहते हैं, कैसा उनका demand supply जाता है. So really a basic set of principles when you apply, you can very quickly create the vibe model. That's a very, very easy model to create. Because cement कौन खरीदता है? आप नहीं खरीदते हो, आपका कॉन्ट्रैक्टर खरीदता है, करेक्ट? तो सीमेंट के धंधे में मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग इज द कॉन्ट्रैक्टर्स रिलेशनशिप विद द रिटेलर. It is not your, you may see any number of Ultratech ads. It's very unlikely you're going to tell your contractor Ultratech की चाहिए मेरे को, ऐसा तो नहीं होगा. So the trick is to figure that out कि इसमें brand loyalty है क्या, और तो ये brand loyalty पे चलता है कि distribution mind पे चलता है कि margins पे चलता है कि कैसे चलता है धंधा, right? So all you have to figure out is what is the competitiveness, why do people keep on selling it. So Ultratech as a company, for example, has a long-standing relationship with distributors क्योंकि family business है, काफी दिनों से चल रहा है, तो people have remained. So it's a very, very strong network.
So that data allows you to onboard all distributors of Ultratech.
And second is that, look, I am like LinkedIn, right? I don't go and do business with someone who comes cold into my doorstep. So Ultratech has to bring those distributors to me. I will not go and talk to each of the distributors. तो मेरा simple LinkedIn referral scheme है कि अल्ट्राटेक बोलेगा उनके डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर्स को कि वयाना जैसा एक पंछी है, वो आएगा, आप इनको ये सब इन्फॉर्मेशन दे दीजिए, फिर फाइनेंसिंग का टर्म्स एग्री हो गया हमारा, तो आपको फाइनेंसिंग मिल जाएगा.
So essentially that distributor business is like a BNPL, like buy now pay later for distributors.
Everything in life is BNPL, boss. I mean, people who use BNPL as if it's some new thing that's come in. I mean, that's how everybody has bought everything. I mean, the first time you used a credit card, you did BNPL.
The vendor part of the business is not exactly BNPL. Like there you are like, or it is BNPL, but vendor is bearing the cost.
Somebody is going to bear the cost. In the traditional BNPL, we had subvention model. So the guy who was selling was the guy who was paying the money for the interest for it. In a lot of new BNPLs, it is actually the guy who is buying who's going to pay the money for it, right? So I think the model of who pays for it is all dependent on the bargaining power. The question is that ultimately everybody's buying now and paying later, except the cash and carry business, right? Where you have to buy now, you have to pay now, everything you have to do now, but everywhere else it's buy now, pay later, right? So I think the fundamental construct is very simple, that when you have referred relationships, it's easier to take a call on credit because you can understand the strength of the relationship as opposed to something new. So we cannot finance the equivalent of a Tinder. हम शादी.com में जो भी आता है उसके शादी होने के बाद we can finance, but हम long lasting relationship के पीछे हैं. So someone comes and says I have no requirement for loyalty of my suppliers or distributors, I can change any of them every day, I will not finance it because nobody is going to be interested to figure out whether I got repaid or not, right? Correct. So the simple funda in life is that's all. You just have to make sure इसमें दोनों को both need each other. The moment you have an unequal relationship, you're dead. So that's all. I mean, so actually this business is roughly from an opportunity point of view, $100 billion a month in India.
But what are you defining here? Like what level of company? Like say companies which are 100 crore plus turnover or 1,000 crore plus turnover. Like how do you define the market here? What kind of companies would you tie up with for funding their distributors?
Let me give you a simple stats. Okay, very nice, interesting stats. The power of 7x. There are 700 companies above $1 billion of revenue. There are 7,000 companies above 5,000 crores of revenue. There are 70,000 companies over 50 crores of revenue. There are 7 lakh companies above 1 crore of revenue. There are 70 million companies below 1 crore of revenue. तो ये जो नंबर देखोगे आप when you start, everybody starts with 700. लेकिन आप अगर धंधा देखोगे तो the most of the धंधा is happening between the 7 lakh and the 70 million. because that is the final place where things are getting bought and sold, right? वो गंगोत्री से आता होगा गंगा, लेकिन वो ऋषिकेश में ही सब लोग डुबकी लगाते हैं ना हरिद्वार में। तो डुबकी लगाने वाला इज दैट 7 लाख एंड दैट 70 मिलियन। वो ऊपर का पार्ट इज जस्ट द स्टार्टिंग ऑफ द थिंग। So that all, as I said, all banks focus on the top, between the 700 and the 7,000 or 700 and the 70,000. The real business is between the 7 lakh and the 70 million. And in that business, if you can focus on it, that's where your $100 billion of requirement is there, large part of it. Correct? So that's the beauty of this whole model that you have. But what we decided is that we cannot go directly and approach the 70 million. Then you need lots of feet on street. तो हमने बोला गंगोत्री से हम लोग एक नाव छोड़ेंगे, वो नीचे 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 आके ऋषिकेश में आ जाएगा, ठीक है? तो फिर so the idea is we have to start from Gangotri. 700 will refer us to 7,000, 7,000 will refer us to 70,000, 70,000 7 lakh, 7 lakh से 70 million. Much easier. और मैं आने के पहले मुझे मालूम है कौन है, right? I don't have to think about them. I don't have to introduce myself to them. They all been introduced. Second is, if you start from the top, one of the nice things is that supply chains are like a long piece of rope. राइट आप टग ऑफ वॉर खेले होंगे तो जो एकदम पीछे बैठा है और जो खींच रहा है और जो एकदम बीच में है, वो दोनों के बीच में टाइम लगता है टू अंडरस्टैंड द पुल, करेक्ट? सो इफ यू स्टार्ट फ्रॉम द टॉप, यू एक्चुअली नो 2 or 3 months before what is happening in the business. Okay, Maruti, when it starts selling less cars, it will order less, correct? So that the trick in life is start from the top, work your way down.
And what is the benefit for a Maruti? Like, does it increase their turnover, or like, what kind of financial benefit do they get by tying up with you?
So the first benefit they get is what I started my first business in, cash management. So I know when I have to pay, I know when I'll receive money. So मेरा predictable हो जाता है. There is no, there is no worry about when I have to pay, when I have to receive money. So if I'm a CFO of Maruti, I can very easily say 7वें दिन में पैसा आता है, 15 दिन में मेरे को पैसा देना पड़ता है क्योंकि मैंने financing करवा दिया है सबका. तो I know when I have to pay or when I have to receive, right? So first is cash management. Second is that I move the credit from my balance sheet to yours. The world over, large businesses focus on how to decentralize credit.
What does this mean? Like,
so Maruti used to, if it has to pay a supplier on day 15, तो उसको पैसा लेना पड़ेगा कहीं से मार्केट से, करेक्ट? या तो अपना पैसा यूज करना पड़ेगा. वो बोलता है उसको कि भैया तुम फिनेंसिंग ले लो, 15वें दिन में आपको पैसा मिल जाएगा, लेकिन इट्स अ लोन. So you will actually have to get a loan for another 30 days. So I will pay you in 45 days only. But 15 दिन को आपको कैश मिल जाएगा. But that's a loan you have taken. So effectively, it's transferred his loan to you. This whole, ability to transfer a loan from my books to your book is the other big benefit of supply chain financing.
Same thing with distributors. So instead of a distributor paying after 60 days, he pays after 7 days through the BNPL service.
Correct. And therefore he makes his, he gives the money and the distributor has to have. But the trick here is, and the trick, that's why I keep going back to affordable credit, right? Ultimately, हर धंधे में एक net margin होता है. Correct? कितना पैसा बचता है? Your interest cost cannot be very, very big part of that. And that's why it's very, very important to be affordable. 95% of the assets we manage in our platform are below 10% interest rates annualized. We are the only players in the market who went the reverse. बाकी सब लोग 18% के ऊपर चले गए, हम लोग 10% के नीचे जाने लगे. Because we realized that there is no other way to make sure he keeps coming back again and again. इंडिया में यू टेल कन्वीनियंस ऐप है, वो ऐप में अच्छा डांसिंग पाई चार्ट है, डैशबोर्ड है, 2 क्लिक मैकेनिज्म है, 1 क्लिक मैकेनिज्म है. वो बोलेगा मेरे पास छोटू है, वो करवा देता है. यार मेरे को वो सब नहीं चाहिए. कितना टक्का है बता मेरे को.
How did you get it down to below 10%? Because I mean, banks are your lending partners and they would expect a certain risk adjusted return.
So look at what are the 4 costs in lending. First is what the bank itself borrows, right? At what rate it borrows. So first we go to the largest guys because then their borrowing cost is lowest. So आज के ज़माने में they'll probably borrow at 4%, 5%, 6%, right? Maximum. So first of all, that should be the cost. Second is there is a cost of acquiring customers. अभी मैं गंगोत्री से ऊपर आया हूँ तो मेरा एक ही कॉस्ट हुआ गंगोत्री पे ऊपर जाने का. उसके बाद सब मैं नाव पे ग्रेविटी से आ गया नीचे, करेक्ट? तो मेरा कॉस्ट ऑफ एक्विजिशन बहुत कम हो गया, राइट? थर्ड है सर्विसिंग कॉस्ट. अगर मैंने एक लॉगिन आईडी नहीं दिया, उसमें मेरा 10 सेंट बचता है. Because the moment I give a login ID and password to anybody, at least twice in a year, they are going to forget it. Correct? And then they're going to need a support center to call up, which means I have to have one person for every 100 guys I give login IDs to. So servicing, actually, what people don't realize is that the moment you give someone an app, actually you need a whole servicing team behind it. तो कस्टमर सर्विस है, वो अच्छे नहीं लगेगा, फिर तो आप वो NPS स्कोर निकालोगे, वो करोगे, ये करोगे. ये खुद के पैर पे कुल्हाड़ी मारना जैसा है. बेस्ट is वही ड्रॉप बॉक्स. इसमें कुछ इंटरफेस ही नहीं है यार, फाइल को अपना ही टैली में आपने इनवॉइस बनाया, उसी में अपने मशीन में सेव किया, खत्म हो गया, पैसा मिल गया, खत्म। हाँ, और दूसरी बात क्या है कि मोमेंट यू गिवन हैप्पी टू टीच देम, you know, whenever you come to India and you stand next to a kirana shop, you'll be amazed to figure out that a lot of these new age fintechs have people coming and teaching people how to use the app. The whole point is that you have a lot of servicing cost. मेरे इसमें नहीं है. And last, the cost of default.
But you still need that person to install the driver.
वो खाली वो लिंक क्लिक करता है और ड्राइवर इंस्टॉल होता
अच्छा,
है।
वो हो जाता है। ओके।
हमारे इंडियंस बहुत अच्छे हैं, उनको आप ईमेल भेज दीजिए कि लिंक क्लिक करना है तो लिंक क्लिक करते हैं, वो तो प्रॉब्लम नहीं है। Correct, that's all you need to do. I mean, you don't need to do anything else, and the trick is to keep that simple.
And the fourth cost
is the cost of credit, which is default.
Okay, like the risk basically.
Risk, correct, right? Because that's what, so if you tell a bank किराने वाले को पैसा देना, और immediately 4% ऐड कर देगा,
because 100 में से 4 लोग पे बैक नहीं करेंगे,
100 रुपए में से 4 रुपया तो जाने ही वाला है आपका, करेक्ट, 4-5 रुपए जाने वाला है। So the point is that we are saying हम लोग शादी की हुई हम लोग finance कर रहे हैं, we are financing the trade, which means that both parties are involved. It is not a single party system. So, the whole idea is that if you've taken a mortgage with your dad standing as guarantor and your dad is the MD of a bank, then people will say there's no risk of giving to Akshay, money. Correct? Guarantor acha hai. Here we have a guarantor like say Maruti or someone in the chain, right? Someone bigger. Then automatically the risk reduces, right? And when so the overall idea right now, for example, we are lucky. Say we are lucky, we have zero default. Amazing है, हमें भी amazing लगता है, सुबह सुबह कभी भी लगता है कि करा कुछ तो गड़बड़ है लाइफ में, बट बट अभी तक है, क्योंकि अल्टीमेटली द ट्रिक इज लाइक दिस, राइट? इफ यू आर ओनली फाइनेंसिंग दाल चावल, जो रोज आपको चाहिए, आप पिज्जा खाओ, पास्ता खाओ, एक बार तो दाल चावल खाओगे, करेक्ट? एटलीस्ट महीने में तो 20 दिन तो खाओगे दाल चावल। तो आप इफ यू आर फाइनेंसिंग दाल चावल एंड यू आर फाइनेंसिंग एट द लोवेस्ट कॉस्ट, यू विल ऑटोमेटिकली बी प्रायोरिटाइज फॉर एनीथिंग, करेक्ट, फॉर रीपेमेंट ऑफ लोन।
मतलब वो आपसे पंगा नहीं लेगा, क्योंकि आपसे पंगा लिया तो
सबसे सस्ता है और मेरे तो धंधा बंद करना पड़ेगा। तो 99% of people are not interested in closing down their business. I mean, there is 1% चोर है, but 99% तो नहीं है ना। तो the trick is that only. The trick is to make sure that you are very affordable, you are very convenient, and you are financing essentials. You don't finance avocados, boss. You don't finance cherry ice creams, boss. I mean, वो सब ठीक है यार, आप कभी साल में एक बार खाओगे, just to be in with the crowd, वो finance करूंगा तो आप पैसे भी वापस नहीं दोगे मेरे को। दाल चावल में nobody can go wrong यार लाइफ में। खिचड़ी is almost everywhere unless the guy doesn't boil the rice, it's generally okay. So trick is that.
Do you give your bank partners some sort of risk sharing, like some sort of risk guarantee? Risk is all on their books.
On their books.
वो फर्स्ट डिफॉल्ट गारंटी एक होता है ना, लॉट ऑफ फिनटेक्स गिव दैट, यू डोंट गिव दैट।
अरे वो टैमरैम होने का ये लफड़ा है ना यार, हम रूल पड़ा तो लगा कि ये एफएलटीजी तो एनबीएफसी दे सकता है, हम नहीं दे सकते हैं, तो इसलिए ये लफड़े में पड़े ही नहीं। एंड सेकंडली, लुक, आई डोंट टेक क्रेडिट रिस्क, सो इवन दो इफ आई गिव अ लॉट ऑफ इन्फॉर्मेशन टू माय बैंक्स, आई टेल देम यू हैव टू डिजाइन द रिस्क योरसेल्फ यार। I mean, you are a banker for some reason, right? I mean, I'm not a banker, you are a banker, so that is, I think, is very, very clear. Second is, the trick is, look, what we said long back ago is that, look, and before the Facebooks and Twitter realized it later, right? I wish I had met Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey and all. कि आप platform बोल लो, you are responsible for the content, right? You cannot say I'm not responsible for the content. So we said, look, even though banks might bring the business to us, we might get the business, and it is the banks taking credit risk. If you don't think this is our money, we are going to be in shit trouble. If I came from a generation which had MySpace before it got Facebook, right? And MySpace people got turned off because of the kind of bad crowd that came in. They allowed everybody to come in as opposed to a Facebook, right? So the advantage really is that you have to be responsible for the content. Make sure that the transactions are happening as clean as possible. Then the banks recognize that you are a responsible partner. And वो कर्मा जो है ना, वो बहुत अच्छा कर्मा है. Because banks, last thing they want to do is lose money. So, so they will keep on giving you more business.
Don't you do underwriting? Like, don't you run algorithms and recommend this is the interest rate? Or does the bank do that? Because that would be your value add, na? That even किसी को 10,000 चाहिए, the bank doesn't need to get into that.
Look, if you take a credit decision, you have to take the cost of credit of going bad. There is no choice about it, right? I am not some Sant Mahadev that, people will just listen to me without expecting me to deliver on the outcome. So I have to, when I tell them something, they expect it to happen. Moment I say I have an algorithm that will tell you whether this credit should be taken or not, they'll say, okay, bad gaya, so will you put in some money? You can't be in the oracle game without putting some skin in the game, right? So the trick in life is to tell them, look, I'll give you all the information.
But how do you solve the bank's transaction cost problem then? वो 10,000 का लोन देने का,
क्योंकि वो 10,000 किसको दे रहा है? वो 10,000 अगर वो ट्रेड को दे रहा है, जहाँ पे उसको मालूम है कि एक पार्टी अच्छा है, एक पार्टी वो धंधा करता ही रहता है, 4 साल से कर रहा है. In his mind, actually, the risk is already gone.
So banks also have like a automated decision making with you. Like they will say Vayana ke through.
They have a portfolio decision में. So अभी 4-5 साल के बाद बयाना बोलता है तो सुन लेते हैं. पहले लेकिन हम लोग we used to represent it as a portfolio, right? We used to say, look, I mean, at the end of the day, this guy is selling chappals, let's say, हवाई चप्पल्स, और इसके हवाई चप्पल रोज बिकते हैं क्योंकि उसका टर्नओवर है. और ये 40 लोग इसके साथ, 40 डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर उसके साथ 4 साल से लगे हुए हैं, और लोग हवाई चप्पल लेके बेच रहे हैं. They are returning back the money to him. So take the entire 40 and create a business out of it. It's a portfolio concept, right? It is not a single borrower. And that's the trick of supply chain financing. If you can do that, then that's when you can make it very good.
So bank just takes a one-time decision of setting a limit and setting a rate.
Correct. But every year they will review it and all that, because that's what banks are supposed to do. But yes, it's fundamentally a real good validation of कि ये शादी अच्छा है कि नहीं है, बस. तो उसके जो भी मार्कर्स हैं लाइफ में, जॉइंट अकाउंट है क्या, कितने साल से एक ही घर में रहते हैं क्या, and all that बच्चे हैं क्या, that all go to determine a good marriage, or not stable marriage. I won't say good marriage. Same thing goes into this. You give the markers to them, they know, okay, this danda is going to go ahead.
And you also like raised capital for Vayana. So what was that fundraise for, and how much have you raised so far?
So we have raised totally about, including this round, we would have raised about 43 million. So we raised 8 million till last year, and then this time we went for a big one. But primarily because the way to look at this business is that lots of it are becoming regulated, right? Not as an NBFC, but just even today, for example, a payment aggregator, you have to have some reserved capital. If you want to set up trades, you need some capital. If you want to set up some international trade exchange, you need capital. So they are all part of what you would call regulated entities, right? So, which require some regulatory capital. So that's one reason for doing it. Second is that we are looking at making sure that once I start working with Akshay को तो राम ने इंट्रोड्यूस किया तो मैं उतना ही देख रहा था. नो, अक्षय सेज आई एम डूइंग डोमेस्टिक, आई एम डूइंग क्रॉस बॉर्डर, आई एम डूइंग ये वाला वो वाला जो भी कर रहा हूँ. If I really want to make sure that Akshay doesn't leave me, I have to do all his trade, which means I need to have all the products. So, people think supply chain finance is just 2 products. It is actually about 16, 17 different products. So you really have a flavor for every trade, what kind of trade you're doing. So, आप mineral water अपने office में लेके आ रहे हो, that trade is very different from if you're buying nuts and bolts to, let's say, you're buying engines. Correct? ये सब अलग-अलग होते हैं. So you might say everything is buying and everything requires credit. They are very, very different, right? So you need different products for each of these markets. So when you start assembling that, you obviously would want to kind of build lot more products so that you can kind of assemble all of that stuff. And lastly, of course, the idea really is that there's nothing in this business that is India specific. I mean, world over is the same problem.
The relationships, no? like your relationship with Maruti and HUL, like that is what you would need to crack in every market which you want to enter.
Look, I mean, the 700 number, right? I talked at the top, right? In a country like US, probably is 70,000, okay, or 7,000, whatever is that number. But it is not huge. It is not like going and saying I'm going to cater to 1 billion people, right? It is still a very, very isolated set. And fundamentally, once you understand the sector, you can find the people who know the right people there to kind of get it done. That is not the issue. But what is interesting about this sector is that whether you go to US to the largest company, you go to Walmart, they will still need some supply chain financing even today. There is no part of their business that is covered by fully. And that's the interesting thing about this business. That's why another 20, 50, 100 Vayanas can come in and everybody will find some business to do, because there is no corporation that has got 100% of its supply chain. And therefore, you always have a gap, and therefore you can always fulfill that gap, and the nature of the product doesn't change. It is like credit card in many ways, right? I mean, one of the reasons why credit card is so portable is that whether I use it in New York or here, and yeah, sure, in New York, I don't use OTP. I mean, or, I don't punch those PIN numbers, but, but the fact of the matter is that the experience is not very different, right? It's pretty much the same. So the idea is the same. So we would like to kind of make sure that, at least from India's perspective, exports, imports, cross-border, we kind of cater to all that. And to cater to all that, you need to be in the other side of the country, right? Because we need to know the buyers also and the suppliers also. So I think that's the other reason why we went in for a raise of money. And of course, this is a good time to raise money.
Yeah, absolutely.
दिवाली के टाइम फटाके नहीं करोगे तो कभी करोगे यार. आपको दिल्ली में रहोगे तो फटाके मत करो, लेकिन
right.
So I mean, this you have to do that. So I think we've kind of been a very very predictable compounding kind of a model. So I think we have had a lot of interest. Even this round was composed with very quickly, very fast. and also by people we knew before. It is not like we came in with all new people.
How has that loan book increased over the years? Like you said, today you're doing 2,500 is your loan book size.
Cumulative credit I had done, say, till March of 2019 was about $2 billion. The cumulative credit today is 8 billion. Right? So despite having a COVID in between, 5 months तो minimum गया हमारा, I think we've still kind of grown very well. And it is interesting because it's an interesting business because it is predictable to a very great extent. क्योंकि जो आज हिंदुस्तान लीवर से आज खरीद रहा है वो कल भी खरीद रहा है, राइट? तो आज ₹1 आया तो रफली एक नेक्स्ट क्वार्टर में भी वो ₹1 आ जाएगा. So I really can build this business easily rather than having to go and find a fresh business every time, right? Yeah. So the trick is that the trick in this business, I think the nice interesting thing is that, and if I build like a network, then I can really, whoever comes in, I can actually grow a lot with that person. Our own calculation shows that if I do $1 with Akshay today, he can expose me to another $15 of business.
Here, Akshay being like the larger entities, or
no, actually any entity, it doesn't matter. So let's say Akshay was a kirana wala, right? मैं हिंदुस्तान लिवर्स के थ्रू से गया और मैं उसका 50,000 रुपए का महीने का जो खरीदी है हिंदुस्तान लिवर से कर रहा हूँ. उसके पास तो वो पीएनजी से भी खरीद रहा है, इससे भी खरीद रहा है, उससे भी खरीद रहा है, वो सब ऐड हो जाएंगे. फिर पीएनजी मुझे और कोई दिखाएगा. Correct? So you really, one guy can expose a lot of value to me just because I started with him. So to me, every Akshay is important. It doesn't matter whether you're large, small, or anything. You will uncover for me other relationships that will allow me to lend faster.
How do you, taking this example, like say a Kirana wala is buying from Hindustan Lever, and then he's also buying from say Balaji, and so he'll put that Balaji invoice also in the Vayana folder, and then you will see that I don't have a relationship with Balaji yet, so then let me go and talk to Balaji. Is that how you do it?
So actually, in the Kirana wala's case, it's actually very interesting. So it doesn't happen that way because first of all, उसको मैं Dropbox नहीं दे सकता हूँ, उसके पास computer तो नहीं है. So yeah, the only thing that he uses is QR code. See, we believe in using technology that the guy understands. So thanks to all these phone pays, Bharat pays, and all the pays in the world, everybody understands the QR code. So मेरा पूरा धंधा QR code पे चलता है. So because that he understands, right? So for that moment we'll get. I think the trick is that when I studied Hindustan Lever, I also knew that this guy was buying from everybody, right? Every Kirana wala has to buy from. So about 45% of Kirana wala's dukaan is from 10-12 OEMs. It doesn't change, right? फिर उसके बाद चावल गेहूं सब आता है, which is unbranded, which I don't go after, right? Because that is a market that I don't understand, right? And then there is a 3, 4, 5% which is very exotic, like some choco pies, exotic stuff है. लोटो का चोको पाई जो भी होगा खरीदता होगा हर महीना, बट मुझे नहीं पता कितना खरीदेगा और आज चोको पाई है कल किंडर है क्या पता. बट ये 40-45% तो मुझे मालूम है. तो मैं जब जाता हूँ डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर के पास, right, and though everybody claims they're exclusive, every distributor in India, like all of us, do multiple businesses. तो वही अपनी बिरादरी में बता देगा कि अरे यार मेरा ये धंधा हो गया, मेरा जो भाई है वो पीएनजी का है, उसको दे देना, और उसका भाई जो है वो नेस्ले का कर रहा है, नेस्ले वाले का भाई आईटीसी कर रहा है. तो अपने आप वो धंधा एक्चुअली स्प्रेड्स लाइक वेयर एवरीबडी कॉल्स यू अप एंड सेज I heard this Kirana wala you are financing, or this entire set of Kirana walas. You don't finance one Kirana wala, but ये रोड पे आप सब किराना वाले को दे रहे हो हिंदुस्तान लीवर के लिए, मेरे पास आईटीसी है और ये है, आप उसको भी दे दीजिए. So that's how you build the business.
But then you would first talk to the principal, now, when a new company is introduced.
Yeah, we'll always go back to the principal, but we will take it up from wherever it comes. So it could be other distributors, right? Because now we know the Kirana wala, right? So we won't start with the Kirana wala immediately. We will let 3 months go by, because in the Kirana trade, credit is only 7 days. So in 3 months, you will actually get minimum 12 repayment cycles. Correct? So तो 12 में आपको पता चलेगा कि ये देने वाला है कि नहीं देने वाला पैसा है ना, कितना तकलीफ देने वाला है. So once he's good, that's when you start exposing yourself and figuring out, there are other people who are interested in Kirana wala. Ultimately, the guy who is closest to the consumer is the most important guy in the supply chain. बाकी सब टाइम पास है. ये जो सबसे क्लोजेस्ट है ना कंज्यूमर, तो किराना वाला तो सबसे बड़ा क्लोजेस्ट है, या पेंट दुकान की हार्डवेयर का दुकान है, जो भी है. So once you get him for one relationship, you can generally get him for all relationships. Correct? Because that everybody is interested in whether you reached him. If you reached him, then everybody wants to come by the same highway. So that business builds up actually very, very fast. It doesn't require too much to build up. The question is that you may not want to give credit to everybody. So that's why now my biggest thing, I keep talking to people, right? One of the things in India is that we seem to think that we should give everybody credit to make them grow. And that is such a stupid argument because everybody is not able to, actually fulfill their credit obligations, right? आप सबको बोलोगे गंगा में डुबकी लगाने का है, तो आप राफ्ट दे के डुबकी लगाओ, ठीक है। आप बिना राफ्ट के साथ जाओगे तो बह जाएगा बेचारा, right? So the question really is that you have to make sure that someone is ready for credit. And that to me is a bigger problem in the market than anything else. I think one of the things you keep talking about BNPL, when credit becomes easy, there is a danger to it. It is not even indiscriminate or discriminate or sab chodi aap. I mean, ऐसे दे रहे हैं. The fundamental fact is when people learn that they don't have to worry about spending more than they earn, the essential culture will also ensure that they don't worry about when they repay.
That is what crossed that subprime crisis, na, US mein.
Everywhere. So I think wherever credit has become easy, and I think we fintechs have to be really responsible about it because we otherwise will sow the seeds of our own destruction, is that the moment it doesn't have a friction point, तो onboarding में friction लगाइए, आप instant credit मत दीजिएगा किसी को. आप, a very interesting thing, if you have, if you go to Kirana wala today, fresh, new guy, he will not give you credit immediately. He will do 1 month of work with you. He will actually ensure that he delivers to your house so that he knows which house you are living in. वो थोड़ा यहाँ वहाँ देख लेगा आपको, फिर ही बाद में बोलेगा भैया आपका एक खाता बुक खोलता हूँ मैं आपका. Correct? That discipline you need. I think this whole idea of saying, I don't care who you are, I've just picked up your civil score and I'm going to give you credit, I think is dangerous. If anything that worries me on this whole business is this, that credit cannot become water, yaar. टैप खोलो, क्रेडिट पानी मिल गया यार, वो हैंड पंप जैसा होना चाहिए, करो फिर थोड़ा निकलता है बाहर, राइट? ये this credit being convenient is, I think, the stupidest thing that anybody has come about with, and I fear that we are crossing. And I think this, new guidelines that RBI has brought up that saying putting a lot of prescriptions. I think, well, the industry thinks it's a lot of regulations. I think the worry is that only. The worry is that everybody's got access to cheap equity money, though it's not cheap, it's very expensive. But you've got money from US or American, whatever it is, and चलो उनका ही पैसा जा रहा है तो ठीक है यार, FLDG दे दो, 100% fee दे दो. I think it is dangerous. And when that thing burns, it will take a lot of us with us who are actually good, because the market will not discriminate between the disciplined and the indisciplined, right? So I think that's my big worry. I think my big worry is that कि कहीं ना कहीं ये musical chairs का game में music बंद हो जाएगा और chair भी कम रहेंगे, सब लोग out हो जाएंगे game में.
Do you also do financing of e-commerce? Like, I believe that is one of the most popular segments in this space of like people who sell through Amazon, because Amazon pays after a certain period. So that kind of.
So if you go back, right? I mean, long distance marriage हम लोग finance नहीं करते. And I'll tell you why this is long distance, right? The seller is selling through Amazon. The Amazon has got the customer. तो seller और customer के बीच में तो relationship नहीं है. कस्टमर का अमेजोन के साथ रिलेशनशिप है, अमेजोन का सेलर के साथ रिलेशनशिप है, और मैं जब फाइनेंस करने जाता हूँ, मैं सेलर को फाइनेंस करने जा रहा हूँ, मुझे तो पता भी नहीं है कि उसका जो बायर है उसके लिए लॉयल है कि नहीं है, तो मेरे वाइब मॉडल में तो बैठता नहीं है ये. आप बोलो कि वो 4 साल से अमेजोन में बिक रहा है, एवरी मंथ वो बिक रहा है, लेकिन देयर इज नो पार्टी एट द अदर साइड दैट आई नो ही इज मैरिड टू, सो देन आई वुड टेक अ रिस्क ऑन हिम. और अमेजोन और फ्लिपकार्ट और समवन विल से, आई बॉस, यू, आई गिवन यू द डेटा, यू टेक द रिस्क, आई डोंट केयर.
It's like guaranteed, no? I mean, he's made the sale, the product has been delivered, तो पैसा तो उसको मिलेगा ही ना.
So that is a very short term business, right? Because the moment you tell Amazon में sale हो गया है, and Amazon takes 7 days to pay the seller, let's say, that's what you are financing, the 7 days, right? That's what I call discretionary borrowing, because if you look at the model, he doesn't require the money upfront every time. He only requires the money. Typically वो सीजन के पहले वो सब डिस्काउंट कर देगा, क्योंकि उसको माल चाहिए, खरीदना है उसको माल, करेक्ट? तो तभी करेगा, बाद में सब टाइम चुप बैठेगा वो, बिकॉज व्हेन ही नोस एग्जैक्टली 7th डे पे पैसा आ रहा है, वो एक रिदम है साइकिल का. टुडे माय मार्केट वुड डिसअपियर इफ एवरीबडी पेड ऑन 120 days in a disciplined manner. Forget 5 days or 10 days. The moment you start the business, चक्की चलने लगा और आपको मान में 120 दिन में बराबर पैसा आता रहेगा, you will plan your life. You don't need credit. So the Amazons and Flipkarts have a rhythm of paying, which I know the rhythm, I know the grammar. तो वो grammar में मैं credit क्या दूं मैं? और credit दूंगा तो जब कभार वो पूछेगा credit मेरे को, तो मेरा cost of acquisition तो बहुत बढ़ेगा उसके लिए. Correct? मैं लूंगा, वो पूरा साल नहीं लेगा और 3 बार लेगा साल का. तो to me that business is a very nice business to kind of quickly grow.
Yeah, I think that's why it was like seen as a low hanging fruit.
So we have never been in the low hanging fruit. हम लोग सब कष्ट करके ही कर रहे हैं यार अक्षय. पेड़ के ऊपर चढ़ के नारियल तोड़ा है हमने वो नारियल वाले से लिया ही नहीं नारियल कभी. There is a small little advantage and disadvantage, but it's okay.
So one last question. I know your time is almost up, but tell me about the landscape. Like, who are the other companies that are in this similar space, and how do you like rank compared to the others, and like just help understand the industry.
Yeah, so I think to me the biggest competitors are banks. Banks who are not on my network, right? Because India mein banks, unlike banks elsewhere, are actually very, very technologically savvy. They are not, they are as good or bad as fintechs. So you take an ICICI, Access, SBI, anybody, I think they're all quick. So I would always rate them, and they have capital and they have low cost capital. So यार जिस दिन उन लोग ने सोचा कि भैया सबको बाहर निकालना है, वो बाहर निकाल सकते हैं, right? I mean, so one has to be very, very clear that they are your biggest competition. Then there are many ways of solving this credit problem, right? So then you have large guys like C2FOs who do dynamic discounting.
What is dynamic discounting?
आपके पास 100 रुपया है आपके जेब में, and you owe with चाय वाला on the नुक्कड़, and you typically pay him end of the month. You 50 रुपया देना है, तो आप उसको जाके बोलोगे भैया चाचा आज पैसा चाहिए तो मैं आपको 45 रुपीज देता हूँ, चलेगा? वो बोलेगा हाँ ठीक है दे दो यार. तो ये तो एक डायनेमिक डिस्काउंटिंग बोलते हैं उसको. नया अच्छा एमबीए टर्म है, बट ठीक है जो भी है. बट बेसिकली द आइडिया इज दैट you have money and therefore you discount it. Of course you don't have to have the money, sometimes you can get from the bank, but the principle is the same. Then there are ways of doing auctions. So Akshay has bought from Ram. Ram will go and put the invoice up in an auction marketplace and people will bid on it. And depending on who Akshay is, they will decide they want to take the risk or not, right? So there are platforms like Credex and Treds in India, for example, this government RBI setup, which are all in the auction marketplace setup.
And the people who give loans, there are banks, or
so in a P2B model like Credex and all run, or other guys run, Trade Credit and all that, it's all basically investors, like people sitting in Japan, for example, who have money and therefore want to put some quick 12%, 13% earning investment, so they put it in, right? So it's typically professionals who have some spare cash and want to earn more than their 5%, 6% that they earn in their deposits, right? So that's the market. Whereas on the Trades platform, which is the RBI setup platform, only banks and now NBFC soon will be able to participate in it.
What is this platform, which RBI set up?
It's called Trades Receivables Exchange. There are 3 of them, and now the 4th one has got an in-principle sanction. But basically, they allow MSME suppliers or large buyers to put up the invoices.
And with some recognized, like there must be a list of companies.
So list of pre-approved companies. तो जो buyers हैं वो pre-approved होते हैं, उनके suppliers से छोटे-छोटे हैं, they can put up their bills, or the buyer himself can offer the bill invoices for discounting, and large banks come in, or large banks come in, and they say अरे इसका शक्ल अच्छा लगता है, चलो इसको we will finance it, right? So they bid for it. So in general, from an economics principle, anything that is bid will probably discover the best price. Correct? This is general economics principle, and if it's well organized, you'll always get the best price. The problem with it is, and this is the reason why we have not been big votaries of it, is that this is like your daily dal chawal dhanda. Correct? So my simple example is, let's say that you have a credit card and you go into a restaurant and you eat, and instead of putting your credit card into the POS machine, you have to open up an app. Okay, where you will see multiple banks that are ready to finance that credit card bill. Correct? And you have to choose the cheapest one, or gives you the best cashbacks, and you choose it. पहले बार तो बहुत अच्छा लगेगा, दूसरे बार भी अच्छा लगेगा, तीसरे बार बोलेगा यार मैं एटीएम से पैसा निकाल के दे देता हूँ, मुझे जाना है बाहर. करेक्ट? तो ये धंधे में भी इनवॉइसिंग इज अ डेली ऑकरेंस, राइट? तो आप यू डोंट वांट टू टेक अ डिसीजन विद एवरी इनवॉइस यार, you will take a decision. So we have never been fond of these kind of too much engagement kind of models.
That bid model will only work for like very high value invoices where it is like discretionary.
So it works. It's not that it doesn't work. I mean, but it doesn't work consistently. So I am 50 years and above old. I like things that just happen every day without me walking and running behind it. So in a non-discretionary model, हर दिन डालते ही जाता है वो, and because I ensure he gets the most cheapest credit, he's not ever.
I mean, the difference would not be more than 1%.
Correct.
Because you're already like sub 10%.
Correct. तो सुबह उठूंगा तो मैं मेरे को अरे आज नया धंधा निकालना है, भागना है मार्केट में, वो नहीं है ना, तो फिर then I'm okay. So I think it just suits my lifestyle, but the idea really is to kind of focus on dal chawal. As I tell every millennial, आप आपका स्विगी का बिल एंड ऑफ द मंथ देखिए, 40% तो दाल चावल पे जाता है. आप बिरयानी लोगे, रोटी सब्जी लोगे, ये सब दाल चावल होते हैं. पास्ता पिज्जा सब होगा, लेकिन ये 40% तो आपका भारतीय होने के नाते आपका तो एक ट्रेडिशनल फॉर्म्स ऑफ डाइट में होगा. And that is the trick. I finance at 40%. 60% वाले अलग हैं life में.
So your kids are all grown up now?
Yes. So, but one is in US doing his fourth year mechanical engineering, and one kid has just gone now to Toronto doing his comp science.
So are they planning to join you at Vayana?
Fancy
No?
nahi.
Okay.
Fancy nahi.
As in you are, like you said, no.
No, it's not a question. No, I have never believed in it. In fact, my kids also have been told very clearly, I will only finance you up to the third year of engineering. Fourth year, you have to figure out yourself. Right? Undergrad. चौथा साल करोगे कि नहीं करोगे आपके ऊपर है, मेरे ऊपर नहीं है. करेक्ट है. 3 साल तक मैं इन्वेस्टमेंट करूंगा, लेकिन चौथे साल आपका है. Right?
Why is that? Like
same thing, right? Angar, yaar. You have to see. You go in at 18 years into undergrad. You're 21 in the third year, right? 21, 22. That is the time when you should start figuring out life, yeah. माँ पिताजी के ऊपर आप डिपेंडेंट मत हो जाना. And you have to get that hunger, right? You have to know what happens in life. So I think that's very important. Otherwise, we only teach our children to be entitled and then worry over their spoiled, यार. Stupid है. Cost आपको और फिर effort के ऊपर आपको डाउट आता है. तो फिर so you have to be very careful. That's my principle.
How do you build hunger in your employees?
कम पैसा तो. नहीं यार. It's fascinating. So generally our intake has been people who have spent time in industry. It is not people who are freshers. So we do take freshers also, but largely it is people who are in. And I think what people in the industry who come to us are looking for is they have seen the work and they have done work. I think they just want to get to a point where they're treated as adults. So one of the very interesting things for Vayana is we have no HR. So we have no leave policy, encashment policy, expense policy, reimbursement policy.
मतलब people can do what they want, like जब छुट्टी लेनी है ले लो.
तो छुट्टी का ही नहीं कॉन्सेप्ट ना, तो आप कभी भी ले लो, जब मर्जी आए आप ले लो. आज आपको नहीं काम करना है तो मत करो यार. मैं कहाँ? Because see, the point of the matter is and the reason is very simple, right? I think the world over we focus too much on measuring input. We should be measuring output. यार तुम सब लोग कितने टाइम आप काम पे रहे हो, कितना इंटरेस्ट दिया है, आप स्क्रीन पे ही स्टेयर कर रहे हो क्या? I mean, nonsense है ये. And I think a lot of these MBA principles came from the Industrial Revolution, HR principles. So I think they've all tuned around measuring people. You measure output, right? Don't measure people. Secondly, they're all adults. यार. अभी आप किसी को 15-20 लाख सैलरी दे रहे हो या 50 लाख, फिर उसको बोलोगे 2500 का होटल रूम आपको एंटाइटल्ड है कि 5000 का एंटाइटलमेंट है. क्या है यार? टाइम पास है. If you're giving so much money to someone, you may as well trust him or her to figure out the right decisions. Yeah.
Have you put in place a system to measure output? Like, is there like a very like a tech behind measuring output of all employees in the company? Like, people have these fancy new age approaches like OKRs and stuff like that. So do you have anything like that to measure output, or it's trust?
It is trust. It is trust based, and it is, I think in many ways it's little like the PageRank algorithm of Google, right? मेरा simple है फंडा कि एक मीटिंग रूम में बैठा हूँ, अगर 4 लोग 10 लोगों में से बोले कि ये प्रॉब्लम अक्षय सॉल्व कर सकता है, तो मेरे दिमाग में अक्षय का नाम बैठ जाता है कि ये अक्षय seems like the guy who can solve it. और या 4 लोग बोलते हैं अक्षय के कारण ही प्रॉब्लम हुआ, तो भी मेरे ध्यान में बैठ जाता है कि यार ठीक है यार, ये रूट कॉज कहाँ है. So I think over a period of time on small companies, I don't know whether it spreads when we are 1,000 people or whatever.
How many people do you have now?
We are 125. So, we are not very large. But, so so for example, we have always been work from home, even before COVID started, because I don't like this idea of commuting, right? I mean, आप बैंगलोर में बैठो, 1.5 घंटा जाओ ऑफिस को, फिर एक आधा घंटा पार्किंग के लिए ढूंढो, 2 घंटा तो आपका जिंदगी का वहीं चला गया.
Hybrid or like pure work from home?
Nothing. We have no rules. We have office. If people want an office, we create office.
But if someone wants to join you and he stays in a different city, you'll hire him.
Yes. We have people from everywhere. Yeah, we have people from Behrampur in Orissa, Chandigarh, Baroda. So our first head of engineering sat out of Baroda. I mean, it's always been in Baroda where there was no office. Abhi office बनाया उसने. And उसका decision है. I know. So we have kept offices. Like in Bangalore, there used to be an office. Now people said, no, we are not coming back to office. We said, okay, no office. When you want an office, you put an office. And if you want to come to office, you come to office. Because the whole idea is this idea that I have to sit. I also have a strange thing. I don't believe, companies are families. I think सबने शादीशुदा कर दिए, तो माँ बाप हैं, वो family है यार. Company is obviously a place for professional engagement, learning, career, and all that. I think you should be encouraged to spend time with your real family. I don't want to invite you to Zoom lunches and get you to, put rangoli in the office and यार वो टाइम दशहरा के टाइम पे आप मेरे ऑफिस में रंगोली डालोगे, अपने घर में डालोगे यार। You know, I just find all of this very strange, and I'm probably wrong. You know, I am sure there are people in my company who feel very upset about it. But I just don't. I really believe people should focus time on their family, यार, and not. So you spend 4 hours a day traveling, you may as well spend with your family, ना यार। वो गाड़ी में बैठ के क्या करने वाले हो? So I just think this whole idea of and it's all economic overheads. You know, what do people who are so insistent on people coming on time do? They put one sensor, then they have an HR software, they check kitne bar aaye, then they're worried that people are tailgating, two people will go out together. अरे यार, दिमाग का दही बना दिया इन्होंने। I find the whole concept very strange.
I think a large part of this model succeeding depends on hiring, no? Because you need to really find adults to hire then, no? If the kind of people you hire are not, people can take advantage.
They can, but if they take advantage, they get caught because everybody kind of then points out to them, right? Look, at the end of the day, it is not like you can fool me maybe 5 months of the year, yeah. कोई ना कोई तो बोलेगा ही भैया ये he is working with someone, he or she is working with someone, right? Someone else is depending on his output. वो बोलने वाला कि यार ये आदमी तो मेरे लिए फायदा नहीं था, correct? So it's not like you can escape indefinitely. So the cost of tracking that fellow versus the cost of finding out when he's not working out, I think it's a very lopsided cost. The cost of tracking is much more huge. Secondly, what is the message you're passing to people right from the day they come in? I am going to check you. So then I don't trust you. जो बार्कलेस वाले ने बोला था कि we ask people to give deposits to us and then our pen को हमने टाई करके रखा है वो स्प्रिंग के साथ टेबल में, so that ₹5 का पेन कोई चोरी करके जाएगा करके. This is exactly what we have become with employees, यार. We are telling them we'll pay you a lot of money, but we don't trust you, buddy. तू तो आते तो चोर है, तू तो पहले दिन से तू काम नहीं करने वाला है, तो obviously काम नहीं करने वाला है. Self-fulfilling prophecy है ये. So I think the cost of getting things wrong is so overrated. Because it works most of the time. Most people really, honestly speaking, want to do an honest day's job. People don't want to kind of do a dishonest day's job. This feeling that we have that everybody chore hain, to yaar, of course, sab chori hoenge. Aapne soch liya to fir hoga hi. I think that is all there is to it. Right? Look, I have a very simple philosophy. I want to be treated the same way I would expect others. Simple. I don't want someone to monitor कि भैया ये अक्षय के साथ 2 घंटा क्यों काम कर रहा है यार, बात कर रहा है और कुछ काम करो यार, मुझे काम बात करने बाद बात कर रहा हूँ.
But how do you hire people? Like
largely referrals. So now we have also looked at normal recruiting, but largely referrals, and I think it works.
Again, that PageRank is what you're using.
PageRank is what I'm using to monitor. I mean, to kind of get a little bit of sense of who is really doing well or not well and all that. But otherwise, it's just a mechanism of you figure it out very quickly. In any organization you work, you will find 2-3 names always coming up. You know who your stars are, honestly. And you know who the idiots are. It is not difficult. You don't need appraisal systems. And if you've been in a professional organization, Akshay, 3 months of your life goes in doing appraisals. Then 3 months of your time goes in consoling people who have got bad appraisals, or then redoing their appraisals.
You don't have appraisals. Like, how do you give increments?
Very simple, ना. मैं आज खरीद रहा हूँ, आपको आज लिया आपने इनको. I am going to give you salary. Should I give you salary for your next year's performance or your previous year's performance? Previous year तो हो गया. तो अभी तो मैं इन्वेस्टमेंट कर रहा हूँ ना आपके ऊपर. तो my question is very simple. If I were to hire an Akshay today, how much would I pay him? And ठीक है, अक्षय मेरे साथ 2 साल रहा है, तो उसके लिए थोड़ा और प्रीमियम. So every year I am hiring you fresh.
Right. Okay.
Because I am looking at what I would do with an Akshay today, right? How much would I pay him? Then there is no concept of some tagging. मैं उसको 20% increment दूं या 120% दूं. 120 तो मैं नहीं दूंगा अगर मैं लास्ट ईयर का देख रहा हूँ तो. बट अगर आज मार्केट में मैं पहले अक्षय को 20 लाख देता था और आज की मार्केट में 50 लाख में मिलते हैं, तो मैं उसको अक्षय को 50 लाख दूंगा ना. आप तो आई नो यू, known table is better than unknown one.
You need an HR to do this calculation every year.
No, every guy who is running a team has to do. Look, he has to manage a team, and he has got to run a team, he or she, and he has got to make this calculation. If he sits down and starts figuring out last year's performance, last year's performance only to figure out whether you should stay or not stay. It's a binary issue. The rest of it is, do I need you or don't I need you? If I need you, if I went to the market to get someone like you, how much would I pay? And then I should pay you that much, at least minimum. Simple hai. I don't think there is any major complicated science in this. All increments have to be forward looking. यार मेरे को एक कभी नहीं समझा है गाड़ी चलाते हुए आप रियर व्यू मिरर देख के चलाते हो कि फ्रंट से देखते हो यार. Only when shifting lanes you look at rear view mirror. यार नहीं तो सीधे देख के चलाओ, आगे देखो.
So you're like basically doing extreme decentralization, like, in the sense that you would probably set a vision for the organization and set some broad goals, but decision making is largely decentralized.
ऐसा नहीं होता है यार. I mean, so I interfere in everything that I feel I should interfere in, and I don't interfere in things I don't want to interfere in. I expect everybody to do the same. अगर मुझे मालूम है कि यहाँ पे लफड़ा होने वाला है और मैं बोलूँ नहीं, मैं चुपचाप बैठता हूँ यार, देखता हूँ ये गिरेगा कि नहीं गिरेगा. So at the end of the day, the simple thing is that if I know something, I will get into it, whether it is at a very detailed level or whether it is at the top level. Yes, over a period of time, you get a good set of people who are doing their stuff. Then you will never interfere in some things. You will interfere in things you won't interfere. I think this need to codify everything, right? ये human beings का एक problem है. I mean, we like to put one label, वो एक packaging, उसको, if you are sales, then this is what you're supposed to do. If you're CEO, you're supposed to do. I mean, there's no uniqueness. We're all unique individuals here. We all do whatever we want. My advice, I will not tell someone to run the company like I run Vayana. क्योंकि वो आपका कंपनी है यार, आप जानते हैं. आप if you are the type who is control freak, be a control freak यार. मैं क्यों आके बोलूं आपको कि trust everybody. Your DNA is to not trust anybody. Don't trust. That's your life. I think, but the way I operate is very simple. There are things that catches my fancy, I go and interfere. There are things that don't catch my fancy, like HR, I don't interfere.
If you like the Founder Thesis podcast, then do check out our other shows on subjects like marketing, technology, career advice, books, and drama. Visit thepodium.in, that is thepodium.in for a complete list of all our shows.
Before we end the episode, I want to share a bit about my journey as a podcaster. I started podcasting in 2020, and in the last 2 years, I've had the opportunity to interview more than 250 founders who are shaping India's future across sectors. If you also want to speak to the best minds in your field and build an enviable network, then you must consider becoming a podcaster. And the first step to becoming a podcaster starts with Zencaster, which takes care of all the nuts and bolts of podcasting, from remote recording to editing to distribution and finally monetization. If you're planning to check out the platform, then please show your support for the Founder Thesis podcast by using this link, zen.ai/founder thesis. That's zen.ai/founder thesis. Before we end the episode, I want to share a bit about my journey as a podcaster. I started podcasting in 2020, and in the last 2 years, I've had the opportunity to interview more than 250 founders who are shaping India's future across sectors. If you also want to speak to the best minds in your field and build an enviable network, then you must consider becoming a podcaster. And the first step to becoming a podcaster starts with Zencaster, which takes care of all the nuts and bolts of podcasting, from remote recording to editing to distribution and finally monetization. If you're planning to check out the platform, then please show your support for the Founder Thesis podcast by using this link, zen.ai/founder thesis. That's zen.ai/founder thesis.